Maybe I've been a bit too cocky really here, because I'm lost now. Just banging on about how good I am at maps. I mean, how did I end up in the field? How did I end up in the field? Cycling has changed somewhat over the years. Training methods have progressed, science has played an ever-increasing role, and our equipment, well, it's improved no end. But in the midst of all this change, what are those lost arts of cycling that have been, well, lost along the way? We thought we'd take a look. Starting off with routes. And these days, we have a plethora of ride-sharing sites, which we can use to find amazing routes to go out and ride on our bikes. And we also have a load of GPS head units to choose from, which will guide us on that ride, making it very, very easy to find those beautiful, beautiful routes. But back in the day, if you wanted to know a really good route that was local in your area, first you had to join a club, then you had to be accepted on the Saturday ride. You had to be fit enough, lean enough, you had to have the right kit, and you had to be accepted into that group. And also, while I'm on the topic, while I'm going off on a rant here, well, you didn't have Google Maps or online mapping at all. If you wanted to research a route for yourself, well, you had to get one of these. We don't really see them that often these days. A paper map. And well, you'd scan the map and look at any potential routes which might be of interest. You'd look at the topography, you'd find the little back roads, you'd find the little linking roads and trails that might link a route you already knew and create an even better route. And yeah, I think it's a shame. It's a bit of a lost art, if I'm honest. So, routes. Okay, right. I am definitely guilty of this one, I tell you. Pacing without a power meter. So, when I first started cycling, I didn't have a power meter. And well, to be honest, not many people did. You just kind of paced your effort on feel. Using your head, kind of deciding how hard you were going, dependent on if your legs were hurting. You didn't look at the numbers at all, there weren't any. I myself remember doing the main individual time trial in the 2017 Vuelta, and well, I was first off, which meant I was last on GC. So the thing was, I was petrified because the time limit is kind of quite tough in a Grand Tour in a time trial. Because I was first off, I didn't have any markers in front of me, and also my power meter ran out of batteries, which was, well, a bit of a disaster, because suddenly I just had no idea how hard I was going. I remember just batting along in blind panic, thinking, I hope I'm going hard enough. And I just had no idea. I think it was because I'd become so reliant on using my power meter, I'd almost forgotten how to pace my effort. So it's definitely a lost art of cycling, I feel. And if you do want to kind of practice your pacing, what I would recommend, if you yourself feel you've become a bit too reliant on your power meter, do your normal efforts, do your normal intervals, but pick one where you don't look at your head unit, you know? Switch your head unit off, or look at the map function instead, or just have one screen where it's just time. So you're just looking at the time, you're not looking at the numbers or the watts. And then do your normal effort and see how the power compares. You might surprise yourself actually, you might do more than you thought you were capable of. Unlock some hidden potential. Power is a great training tool, but can hold you back as well sometimes. So don't forget that lost art of pacing with your old head. Right, okay, now this one is probably more of a rule than an art form. Who remembers when you couldn't go out on your bike if it was less than 20 degrees in shorts and a jersey? It was just a massive, massive no-no. If you had your knees on display and it was 17 degrees or something, well, you'd probably get sick, and it was your own fault for not wearing enough clothes. So it kind of became a bit of an art form to wear as many clothes as you possibly could. You had to have your cap on in the right way. You had to layer your clothes right, I mean, definitely cover those knees for starters. And if it was 19 degrees, well, you had to wear all the clothes you had. That's too hot, it's too hot. Right, okay guys, if I'm honest, I'm not actually sure on this one, but I'm putting it in the list to see what you all think. Who here ever used to wrap their bike in newspaper at the end of the summer and then leave it in the attic? Sounds a bit strange, doesn't it? But my late Uncle Roger, a big hero of mine who used to race semi-professionally on the continent and also on the domestic race scene in the UK, he always used to tell me that at the end of the season when he was racing, he'd take his bike apart, take all the components apart, meticulously clean everything. There wouldn't be a spot of dirt left on any bit of the bike. And then he'd wrap it all in newspaper. And apparently there's a skill to doing this. And he meticulously wrapped it, and it was an art form. And then you bring it back out again in the summer, build it all up again, it'd be in perfect condition, and it'd be ready to go for the next race season. I'm not sure if anyone else has done this out there. I would love to hear from anyone if they have, so please let me know in the comment section below. Is this a thing? Is this a lost art form? Did it ever exist in the first place? Please let me know. These days, I think we are really lucky to have so much science that can guide our nutrition. But well, if you think maybe 10 or 20 years ago, nutrition was more of an art form, to be honest. It was kind of word of mouth and information passed from one cycling hero to another. And well, you didn't know your ketone. You didn't know how many carbs to eat per kilogram of body weight or how many hours to wait until you had your protein. Well, you just listened to what people said, really. Like, for instance, if you found you got dehydrated often on a ride or you struggled to drink enough, well, the advice wasn't to drink an electrolyte sports drink or, you know, maybe take a few more bottles with you and make sure you had sips often throughout the ride. No, it's just to drink less. It was get used to being dehydrated. Stop drinking in the first place. It's the same with food as well. If you struggle with the dreaded bonk and running out of energy, well, just get used to it. On your training rides, don't eat any food. You'd go off to 100 miles on an apple maybe, you'd feel terrible, but you thought it was good for you. Part of it was actually true because a lot of riders these days do fasted training and it seems to be making a resurgence. So maybe the science is saying if we do it in a controlled manner, well, it actually is good for us. Either way, I think the main taking point of all this is that maybe riding until you bonk as hard as you possibly can is an art form that should probably stay in the history books, if you ask me, because, well, I just prefer not bonking and ending up in the hedge. Now, this one is definitely a lost art form, winter training. Now, back in the day, you wouldn't start training hard in the winter. Oh no, you wouldn't be doing any efforts or intervals. To be honest, you wouldn't start training until January. And well, you wouldn't do any hard efforts until February. It would just be long hours, getting the miles in. Every week you'd be wanting to get your weekly total up. Just long, steady, slow miles, that's all it was. But it is a bit of a lost art form now with the likes of training platforms guiding our every move out on the bike. And I think it's kind of a bit of an art form I miss, to be honest. So I'm definitely adding this one to the list. Winter training. I remember sitting on the sofa in December, not worrying about a thing. These days I'm 10 minutes an anaerobic threshold by the start of December. Okay, and that brings me on to my next point. With the advent of the internet, well, we now have a plethora of training platforms, but back in the past, before the internet, well, you had a pen and you had some paper. Remember these things, folks? I've tried writing a bit here, I've almost forgot. I remember my coach giving me tips on how to actually write a training diary. And that's just something you don't do these days, is it? I was really meticulous about it as well, and I was so proud of my training diary. I'd have real neat columns with the date, the time, the distance, my average speed on the ride. If I was lucky and I had a little cadence sensor, I might put in the average cadence throughout the ride. And then most importantly, I'd have my comment section at the end. I'd write down how I was feeling on the ride, how the day went, if I managed to eat well and things like this. And I just kept a diary and a note of all my training rides. Yeah, it's just, we've lost that a bit and I'm a bit sad about it, but at the same time, it has saved me a bit of time in having to keep that diary and talk about how much I was suffering. Right, next up, big gear riding. And well, back in the day, there was no such thing as 12-speed group sets or 36-tooth cassettes. Oh no. If you came to a climb and you didn't have the gears, well, you ground over it. You just gritted your teeth, lowered your cadence, and used your strength, like I'm, well, trying to do now. But it's not something you see that often anymore. I think these days it's more focused on cadence and keeping a high rhythm, and well, maybe equipment just allows us to pedal in a much smoother manner these days. Definitely with 12-speed cassettes, there's just so much more gear choices. But I think the low cadence art form of cycling training isn't completely lost. You still see riders these days using bigger gears out in training. I myself like to use 3 times 30 minutes at 50 RPM in a 6-hour ride. And I felt it did have a benefit. It did give me a bit of added strength. And if you'd like to try it, next time you're out on a ride and you come to a climb, don't drop your gears down to keep your speed up and increase your cadence. Instead, get over it at 50 RPM and really use those muscles and see if it works for you. It might not. You might be suffering like I currently am now. I've forgotten how hard it was. But you never know, might improve your sprint. Right, thank you everyone for watching. Those are some of my lost arts of cycling that I think have maybe been resigned to the history books. But it's been interesting looking back, to be honest, and I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you think I've missed? What are some other lost arts of cycling that we just don't see today? Been an interesting one, and I'm not sure what else is out there that we've lost. Maybe I'm too young to know, so enlighten me, please. But thank you everyone for watching. I'm off for a ride now, and I tell you what, it's 19 degrees outside, so getting the leg warmers back on, because you can't be going out with your knees out when it's, cooler than 20 degrees. I'll get a cold, I'll catch my death. See you everyone.